Did you ever see something that made you say, how did they do that? Did you ever see something that made you say, how did they do that? A fun welcome to our podcast with Randy Chris, where we talk to those who did it. Tell us how you did it. Tell us how you did it. Tell us how you did it.
All right. Well, welcome to our podcast. How did they do that? Did you ever see something that really made you say, how did they do that? Well, we like to find the answer to those questions. Today, I've got Nikki Stauffer. She lives in Franklin, Tennessee. She's a leading oncology pharmaceutical expert in the country. Because of her proven track record using the systems that she personally developed, she is aggressively sought after by name brand biotechnology companies to launch their multi-billion-dollar newly developed drugs. That sounds like a lot of responsibility, Nikki. Is it that much responsibility?
Well, Randy, good morning, first of all.
Thank you.
And thank you for the introduction. That whoever that person was that you just introduced sounds very, very impressive. I'd like to meet her. But thank you for having me on. And to answer your question, it is a lot of responsibility. I mean, I'm not selling widgets, and I'm not selling something for sore throats or earaches. We're talking about life and death here. So I carry my responsibility very, very heavily.
So just, I want to talk about you personally some today, but just to let everybody know the caliber of what you're doing. It's my understanding that you're launching brand new technology drugs that are like last resort kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. So I have been in the industry for years, and I started out in neuroscience, where I launched drugs that were for schizophrenia and those types of disorders. And then I have just over the years have kind of created a niche for myself, which is exactly what you said. I launch new drugs, and more specifically, new mechanisms of drugs. So without getting into details, because this is not a scientific podcast, the types of drugs that I launch are new to the world and new to the industry and new to physicians, and they are new options for patients. And so it's not only a delivery of what can the drug do, but it's a delivery of how the drug does it.
So I thought about you the other day. I think Tuesday, I was listening to the news, and it said that they had performed some study on colorectal cancer, and that like 15 out of 15 were cured. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that it was some new technology. And I thought, I was thinking about this podcast, and I was saying, I wonder if that's what Nikki does. This is such new stuff. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if you knew about that study, and are we on the right track about what you do?
Mm-hmm. I know exactly what study you're referring to. And yes, that was a landmark study. It's a very small study. I believe there were 15 patients in it. But the takeaway from the study was it was statistically significant. And of all of the 15 patients that were in the trial, all 15 patients had a complete response. And that was using a drug class called immunotherapy, which is new to the treatment of oncology drugs. And although it's very, very early, that's a very small trial. That is exactly the type of information and education that I would be rolling out to my physicians. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I heard that also on TV. And the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, I wonder who that is, and I wonder what drug that is, because I want to be part of rolling that out to the industry.
Maybe you can get a sign-on bonus for that one.
That's right. That would be a good one to have.
So let's talk about Nikki Stauffer. You've reached, I wouldn't say, you were way up there in your profession, and people would love to just do what you do. And you're young and beautiful, and you wonder, how did they do that? How do you get there? But what kind of kid were you?
So I think it's probably fair to say that I was the ringleader of my crew. I've never been shy. I've always had a big personality, more so when I was younger. I was always the kid in the class that raised my hand to answer every question. And I was always the kid in the class that wanted to go to the
Pick me, pick
me, I'll
pick
answer
me.
the question. Here, let me read the passage. I want to read. I want to read. I want to be the one that if anything needs to go to the office, I want to be the one that, takes it to the office just because it gave me an opportunity to interact with the principal. And interestingly enough, it wasn't because I wanted the attention. I look back on it. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this. I'm actually not overly comfortable with attention and recognition, um, even today. But it was more about just leadership. It was more about just being driven and being the one who wanted to answer the question and just being good at what I did and just being
So,
recognized as a
so
leader.
what you do takes an extreme amount of confidence to walk into boardrooms with the CEO of a multi billion dollar international drug company. Where does confidence like that come from?
Hmm. So that's a good question. And I do think that confidence, I was always a very confident child. I was always I'm just very independent by nature. And I'm sure that a lot of that has to do with the way I was raised, right? We're all products of our environment. And I was raised by, parents who I had to work and I had to be an active member of my family and of my household. And for example, my mom was, she was a working mom. She was always a professional and she always had a lot going on. And I had younger siblings. I was the oldest, so I'm sure that has something to do with it. If you've read the book Birth Order, it will tell you that I'm just driven by nature because I'm the firstborn. But, I have vivid memories growing up of, doing my own laundry at a very young age. I mean, very young age. And I have memories of if I wanted to wear a pair of jeans to school tomorrow and they weren't clean, then I would go throw them in the washer and I would throw them in the dryer and I would have them ready, for the next day to wear to school. And I remember situations like I went to summer camp every summer, and I always went by myself. I didn't go with friends. I didn't want to go with my friends. I wanted to go to summer camps and meet new people and be around people that I didn't know. And I remember one summer specifically that I told my mom that I needed to have a physical to go to summer camp. It was required. And I mean, I was like in fourth grade. I'm not exaggerating. I was probably 9 or 10. And I have vivid memories of my mom saying, well, call the doctor's office and schedule a physical. You know your appointment, or you know your schedule better than I do. And I was like 9 or 10. So I think it was, I was independent and I am independent. But I think because of the situations I was put into as a child, which I'm very, very grateful for and thankful for, and my mom knew what she was doing, created that confidence because I saw that although I'm uncomfortable doing this, I can do it. And that just has grown into my adult years.
Well, so through high school, you were a leader. I did read your bio that said you were like the homecoming queen and a pageant queen state, and obviously you're beautiful, so I can believe that. And that you were far above most kids' abilities, even in high school and then through your college years. Did you feel like you had it to begin with, or did that change over the years? Were there events in your life that made you say, yes, I can do anything?
Hmm.
Because most kids, 18 years old, they go, oh, afraid to even have an interview.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a great question.
Tell me about how you did that.
Well, I think, like we were talking about, what kind of kid I was. I mean, I remember being in kindergarten and, the town that I grew up in had a May Day parade. And the teacher got to choose two students in her class to carry the banner for the entire kindergarten class. And I was one of the two students that she chose. And so I look back on that and I'm like, well, that was probably my first leadership opportunity and I got a taste for it. And I look back on that and I'm assuming that she recognized that I had probably some natural leadership abilities, and I certainly wasn't trying, but it's just an innate thing that I have. And and it's not been perfect. I've run for all kinds of student government positions. I've won most, but I haven't won all of them, and there were probably very legitimate reasons why I didn't win them. But as I put myself out there, I learned what I was good at, and I just really stuck with those types of things. And I also recognized what I was not good at. I mean, you'll never see me on a sports team. I'll never be the captain of the basketball team. I'll never be, but I did recognize early on that I'm very much of a participant in life. I'm not a spectator, and I don't want to be at the meeting. I want to be a part of the meeting. I want to be leading the meeting. I want to be making change, and I love that feeling.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So I heard a good anecdote from you, something about when you won the state crown for the pageant, the Miss Illinois farm, whatever it was. It was a statewide pageant, and there was some question that demonstrated how you could win a crowd over, and that you were like crazy having the whole people laugh. They couldn't even talk to the next people because they were laughing. Tell me about that.
Well, that's funny that you bring that up. So I'm very much of a what you see is what you get person. I mean, I'm the same if I'm sitting next to the mayor or the town bum, and quite frankly, I enjoy both conversations. But I'm just it's just who I am and how I'm wired. And you mentioned the pageant system, so that's one of those things I'd never done before, but I thought I would put myself out there. And a lot of the reason for that was because it was a scholarship pageant. So it was during the years when I'm going to college, and obviously any kind of economic help you can gain is great. So I ran at the county level, and I won the county level, and then I went to state, and I won state. And part of that process at state was when you make the top 10, you have to answer a question that you draw out of a hat. And the question that I drew out of the hat was, when you think of the word light, what comes to mind? And of course, everyone around me are giving me these very deep, profound answers about the world and philosophy and world hunger, and I just said what came to my mind, and that was light. When I think of the word light, I think of light bread, I think of light peanut butter, I think of light cheese, all of these light tasteless foods I've had to eat for the past 6 months because I knew I was going to be standing in front of you wearing a bathing suit. So when I think of the word light, it just happens to be the word, what comes to my mind right now. So, I couldn't believe the response that it got, because I was honest. I didn't say it to be funny. I said it to be, that's really what I think of when I think of the word light. So I don't know if that helped me win or not, but
It must have.
that was what I said.
So you got your college degree,
Hmm.
and it's not in a field that is related to what you do, like thousands of people do.
Hmm.
Uh, how did you get from college to where you are now?
Hmm.
Uh, what was your like first job, the first job of real responsibility? Let's put it like that. That put you on a trajectory to get somewhere that's a leader of people and able to be at that caliber of management and sales and things.
Hmm. So I think it goes back to my first job, right? So when I'm where I'm from, you can work when you turn 15. You have to go to the courthouse, you have to take initiative, you have to get a work permit. And I just was chomping at the bit. I mean, I could not wait to turn 15, and I could not wait to get a job. And on the day I turned 15, I went to the courthouse on my own, and I probably rode my bicycle, knowing me, and I got a work permit, and I got my first job. And I've just always been driven like that. I've always I like to work. I get a lot of enjoyment out of working, and I did the typical high school jobs. I worked at Rack's Roast Beef. I worked at a checker at a grocery store. I was a lifeguard. I went through lifeguard training. After I became a lifeguard, then I actually went on and became a WSI, which is a water safety instructor, which I actually trained lifeguards. So it's just, I love to learn, and I love to teach. And so interestingly enough, when I went into college, my degree is actually in educational psychology. I had to student teach, and what I wanted to do with that degree was I wanted to become a guidance counselor. because I wanted to be able to teach that age group and lead them to the next stages of their life, them help them figure out what path they wanted to take. Um, but it was one of those situations where at the end of my college years, I got a job, and it had nothing to do with my degree. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna jump into this, and I'm gonna get some experience, and I'll go back to school, and I'll finish, I'll get my master's. And then life happened. I took that first job, and I did well at it, and then I got another job, and I did well at it, and ultimately it led me to where I am right now. I did not go to college saying I want to be a pharmaceutical rep and I want to sell chemotherapy. That was never a
You
goal of
probably
mine.
didn't even know that
I
existed,
did.
really,
And
right?
it's interesting because even to this day, when somebody says, "What do you do?" I sell chemotherapy, and they say, "You sell chemotherapy? Like there's more than one chemotherapy. Somebody has to sell it." I didn't even know the industry existed. So it
So you went to this, you'd said you went to a nursing home and you were passing out candy and cups to doctors' offices to get referrals for the nursing home. Tell me what happened on one day that was eventful in your life that moved you from there to a real leadership position.
Well, so one of my early jobs was, and this is funny looking back, I was a director of marketing and admissions for a skilled nursing facility. Again, I knew nothing about it. I had no idea what I was doing. But they were paying me $22,000 a year, and I thought I was a millionaire. I thought I was going to be able to work for a few years and retire because I was making all this money. And oh my gosh, they're paying me $22,000 straight out of college. You're kidding. So I started that career as a marketing director, and one of the goals one of the objectives of that position was to go around and create referral sources to feed into that skilled nursing facility. So yes, one of the things that I did was filled coffee cups and took them around, and just built relationships and put us on what I thought was putting us on the map. And there were a number of events. There wasn't any really one particular event, but I really, in typical fashion, I started to learn the business side of it and not just the marketing and the sales side of it. And the next thing you know, I was asked to actually take over the building as the administrator and become the skilled nursing facility administrator, which of course I was so young and so green. And I did that, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to learn the industry, and in doing that, I went from selling marketing services and working displays and giving out candy to literally being responsible for life and death, literally being responsible for taking calls in the middle of the night that we have a gas smell, that there's a gas leak. It just catapulted me into responsibility and leadership and knowledge. And there really wasn't one particular incident. There were multiple, but it was life changing. And it just showed me again at a young age that when I dug my heels in, I could do it because I had people
So,
twice my age reporting to me.
so there are plenty of people who would become an executive director of a skilled nursing, and 40 years later, they're the director of a skilled nursing. I can point to 10 of them right here in Lee County, I guarantee you. How did you progress from that responsibility with a good
Hmm.
paycheck in a small town?
Hmm.
How did you get to where you're now nearly world famous as this oncology salesperson who they come and ask you to come?
Hmm.
You don't go say, "Can I have a job?" They come and say, "Please, Nikki, work for us." How does that happen?
Oh, I love you. Man, you're making me feel good this morning. So I was fortunate, very, very fortunate. A lot of this, Randy, has to do with luck. And I was very fortunate that that skilled nursing facility position was with a huge corporation who had come into the town that I was living, and they owned it. And so not only did I get exposure at the local level, but I got exposure within this corporation, and they recognized I guess my talent, and they catapulted me throughout their organization. I mean, I became a regional director, I became a divisional director, so I climbed the corporate ladder within that corporation. um, And
And what kind of time frame did something like that take
it
to where
didn't
you were
take
at the
long.
pinnacle of that company?
It didn't take long. It took about 3 years. And keep in mind, I was young and I was single, and quite frankly, that's all that I did was work. But I absolutely loved it. I'm somebody who I get a lot of fulfillment out of my career. And it took about 3 years, and then
So you were like 27,
I was
28 with
probably
huge responsibility in the top management of a large corporation?
correct. Yes. Again, yes. And so I left. So that company had a healthcare division, a healthcare staffing division where they staffed nursing homes and they hospitals, and they staffed them with professional, healthcare providers, nurses, I mean, occupational therapists, PTs. And so they asked if I wanted to go to that division and move over to that division. Well, operating principles are the same regardless of what industry you're in. Um, and so I said, sure. I mean, it was another opportunity for me to learn another industry. So they moved me over to a different division, and I did the same thing there. I started with a small scope of responsibility and grew it, and became a regional again, and then I became a divisional again. And by this time, I was in my early 30s. I was actually 31, and I was working all the time and traveling the country, and I got married. I met my husband, Mike. We were married when I believe I was 32, and one of the reasons that I loved him so very much was because he was so supportive of me and my career. But something significant happened when I believe I was 32. We had just gotten married, and I had a meeting in Austin, Texas. And after my meeting that night, I flew from Austin to LA, and I landed in LA late on a Wednesday night. And I get my rental car, and I was driving up the coast. I think it's the 101 to my hotel, and I had a flat tire. And this was late. This was in the middle of the night. And it was along the stretch of highway that Enos Cosby had just pulled over and had a flat tire, and he was shot, unfortunately, while he was changing his
Wow.
tire. He had been robbed and shot. So of course I called my new husband and I said, "All right, I'm having a bad 5 minutes. I'm on the interstate. I've got a flat tire." I tell him where I'm at, and he just went into meltdown mode. He said, "When you're single and you're flitting all over the country, that's fine, but you're not single anymore, and this is affecting me. I'm laying in bed at night worried about you and where you're at and what you're doing, and now you're on a highway in California and you've got a flat tire and I can't do anything about it." So after that trip, I came home, and we sat down, and he said, "Look, I'll support you in anything you want to do, but I'm this is concerning to me and it's affecting my life now. So I think, we need to talk about what we're doing here futuristically with your career." And I was like, "Well, what in the world am I going to do? I've always worked. I've always worked a lot. I've always traveled." And his mom was the director of nursing at a large healthcare facility. And I had a long conversation with her, and she said, "You need to look into pharmaceuticals." And quite frankly, at the time, I thought all they did was deliver donuts. And all these pharmaceutical reps running around, and I wasn't real sure what they did, and I had no idea the value that they added in their careers. And so anyway, to make a long story short, she set me up with a director that had a rep that called on her. She said, "Let me get you in front of somebody," and I talked to them, and the rest is history. They hired me, and here I am.
And that was for a huge company that multinational?
That was for Eli Lilly. That was I began my career at Eli Lilly, and the interesting thing about that was I actually began my career, which is another stroke of luck, in neuroscience because of my career, and my track record and my experience. Usually in pharmaceutical sales, you start as a primary care rep, which means you call on primary care physicians, and that is the career ladder. You start there, and then you work your way up to the pinnacle, which is what I would consider myself to be at right now. But because of my age and my experience, I guess my success, they put me right into a specialty position. So I got to skip a lot of steps, and I started in neuroscience specialty, calling on
So what's
psychiatry.
it like going to doctors' offices and, everybody says, oh, MDs, and they're like almost like gods. They kind of think themselves as gods sometimes. And I know that can be troublesome to just either a cold call or even appointments. And I know you do training for them and stuff. What's it like interacting with those types of people who aren't really your boss, but they are your boss because if they don't buy from you, you don't have a job. So how's that all work?
hmm
How do you do that?
Well, in a nutshell, it was terrifying. I don't even know. I can't even think of another word to put around it. Keep in mind, I am not clinical. I don't have a clinical bone in my body. Um, Someone had mentioned medical sales early on to me, and I was like, no way am I going into medical sales. I hate medicine. I hate blood and guts. No way. So it was terrifying. But in my interview with Lily, I actually was, the first one to say, look, I'm a duck out of water. I don't know anything about medicine or really science, to be honest. I don't know anything about how these drugs work. I don't know anything about it. And they assured me that with their training program that I would be prepared coming out. And sure enough, the training programs within the pharmaceutical industry, especially in the oncology arena, is unbelievable. I felt like I went through a crash course of getting my master's degree in about a 6-week training period within Lilly, and it reminds me of a Xerox level training program that. It's extremely difficult. I mean, it was 6 weeks over the weekend. You stayed in a dorm like you were in a college. You studied night and day. You would go to class all day. You would run through Taco Bell and get something to eat. And then you would go back to your dorm and you would go to your groups and you would study all night and role play and practice. And it's extremely difficult. And our final exam was we had to sit down with a surgeon in front of a camera and be videotaped and do a role play. And you can imagine what that was like and the zingers they threw at you. But that was your final exam. And once I got through that piece and that training, I mean, it was so hard, but I was so prepared coming out. And then you talk about gaining confidence. I'll never forget walking into that first appointment and literally shaking in my shoes, thinking, "Oh my God, they're going to ask me something. I'm not going to have a clue, and I can answer his questions." And that was a confidence booster. And of course, I couldn't answer every question, and I was the first one to say, "You know what? I don't have a clue, but I'll find out and I will get back to you." And that's just sales 101.
And
And
so follow up and stuff like that does matter.
oh,
Did you ever have
100%.
any confrontations or
Oh,
serious moments that gave you pause with the doctors?
so for anyone who is watching this and in the back of their minds, they're thinking, I want to be a pharmaceutical rep. This sounds great. You get to run around and you make a lot of money and you get to run in and out of, physicians' offices and have lunch and wear fancy suits. And that is a lot of it, but you have to have very broad shoulders to do what I do. And I mean, I just as recently as this week on Monday, I went to what's called a tumor board, which is when oncologists and radiologists and surgeons sit in a room and they discuss cases. And afterwards, a physician came up to me and was asking me some questions about my drug specifically. And it was just he didn't like what I had to say or how I said it, or maybe he was having a bad day, but he really got in my grill and he was very upset about our mechanism, and he'd used it and there was a side effect profile that he didn't like. And Randy, what we have to remind ourselves is I don't know what's going on in that physician's life. I don't know what kind of day that physician has had. Back to my
Mm-hmm.
earlier statement, my physicians are not treating earaches and sore throats. They are treating life and death cancer patients. And he may have just walked out of a treatment room where he just told a 25-year-old young mother that she has stage 4 HER2 breast cancer and is not going to live for 6 more months. I don't know.
Right.
We don't know what has happened in that physician's world. So I always try to keep that in perspective when I've just gotten my lunch eaten by a physician. It may not have anything to do with me, and it may not have
Right.
anything to do with my drug. It may
And
just
you have
be
that ability to just say, hey, you leave it at the door like every other business,
that's right.
right?
That's
You know,
right.
you just put those problems away and say, okay, on to the next
That's
one. That's
right.
all anybody can do, isn't it?
And I can tell you there have been multiple times when a physician has for lack of better words, unleashed on me in a call or gotten, ugly with me in a call. And quite frankly, I've been terrified to go back in, and I've gone back in and they don't even remember the discussion that we had. They don't even remember that they were ugly to me the last time that we saw. So I don't bring it up. They don't bring it up. We have a very productive conversation, and it's a
So how
win-win.
many of them say, Nikki, Thank you for bringing this to us. This has helped several of our patients actually survive and go into remission. And had you not told us about this new wave of oncology drugs, we wouldn't have had this result. Does that obviously has to happen to you?
More often than you would think. And
Right.
that, when you talk about what motivates me and why I do what I do, there is nothing more motivating than when a physician says to me, you're I know exactly where I'm going to use this. I know exactly the patient I'm going to use this in. I know I've got a patient whose daughter is getting ready to graduate from high school, and I've just got to get her 6 more months. I've just got to cross that finish line, and this is exactly what I need. And again, that goes back to I'm not selling, lozenges for sore throats, and quite frankly, I don't want to. I want to be in a
Right.
high risk, high stakes game that I can deliver value that's going to change somebody's life and the course of somebody's life.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you. This has been a great interview. But let's talk about Nikki. Tell me, what are some things that you would give advice, say, to your children to get the confidence that you have?
Well, I do have children. I have two daughters. I have a 13-year-old
Mm-hmm.
and a 15-year-old. So we are fast approaching these conversations, and we are actually having, to a point, to a degree, conversations now. But if I were to if I were to have to give them advice, there are a couple of things that I'm really big on, and anyone who knows me will tell you this. And one is just to be accountable, and to be accountable for your actions and for yourself, and good or bad, take ownership of it. And I
Well, that's kind
remember,
of a novel approach for the way the world is right
there you
now,
go.
isn't it?
There you go. Own your successes, but own your failures. I'll never forget. I was at a national sales meeting for a large, one of the largest pharma companies in the world that I used to work for, and our sales were not going the way that they thought that they were going to go. We were missing our goals, and the national director of sales got on the stage, and she was a very highly decorated professional and hugely successful, and someone who was very credible within the industry. And she came up on the stage, and we were all ready to just be chewed out 100% because we were missing projections by so much. And we just thought, oh gosh, here it comes. And she walked up on stage, and she took the marketing plan, and right in front of all of us, ripped it in half and threw the pieces down on the floor and said, you know what, guys, I screwed up. I missed the mark. I owe you all an apology, and we're going to start all over. And I just loved the fact that she owned it. She didn't have to do that. She could have blamed it on us. She could have blamed it on the industry. She could have blamed it on a million other things, but she didn't. She said, you know what? I'm the director of this ship. I'm the captain, and I led you down the wrong path, and I screwed up, and we're going to start all over. So I'll never forget that, because then to me, I thought, you know what? She recognizes that that was her mistake, and she's human, and now we're all on her side, and now we're all in this together. Um,
So let me ask you this: how do you stay in the game? How do you keep day after day traveling? You have a territory, I assume, and you got to go here, there, meetings, back here, trainings, flights. How do you keep motivated? I would just get so tired of being on the road and meeting and people. I love people, but you can get tired of people.
well,
How do you do it?
I have, I have my moments, and we're all motivated, right, by different things. You know, the beauty of what I do is that the sales professional that I work with is an older, more mature sales professional. I mean, we've all done this for a long time, and we're all um, really pretty seasoned at what we do, and quite frankly, pretty decent at what we do, or we would not be doing it. These are highly, highly coveted positions. But there are a couple things that I do that to stay on top. I want is, don't become complacent. These are very isolating, lonely positions. They can be. It's just me. I'm not on a team. My vice president, who I report to, lives in Kansas City. I don't get up and go to an office every day. I don't report to anybody. I go weeks, sometimes months without seeing colleagues. Quite frankly, I could get up and play golf sometimes and nobody would know, but I don't. I don't take this job for granted. I don't take this opportunity for granted. I think that Dr. Smith may be seeing me today and he may have a patient coming in tomorrow that could benefit from my drug. And if I don't go in there today, he'll never know about my drug and that patient will never get my drug and never have an opportunity to live. So I don't become complacent. I constantly read. I constantly stay on top of the industry and the drugs that go on within the industry. And the other thing too is I read this really good book one time. It was called Never Eat Alone, and it's a great book. I would highly recommend it. And it speaks to the importance of relationships and forging relationships along the way of your career and the importance of pouring into those relationships, those professional relationships, and how being so genuine within those relationships and building your network and building your brand is so important. And I spend a lot of time building my brand, and I spend a lot of time building my network, and I nurture that network, and I don't tap into it to take away from it. I tap into it to add to it and to add to the people, because I have found that if I pour into people, they pour into me. So it's much more than just networking and networking meetings, but actually the genuineness of building my network. And that's what I do to stay on top of it too, because I tap into those people. I drive 1,000 miles a week. I've got plenty of time to tap into them, and it takes work, but I do it. So those are a couple of things that I do to stay on top.
So, in your career, I assume that over the many years you've been doing this, the the drugs and the medicine and the techniques have
Mm.
changed dramatically from day one till now. How much studying do you have to do? How do you have a home life? How do you juggle the kids, the husband? How do you do that and still have a high pressure? I'm sure they pay you well, so they expect something out of you,
Hmm.
and meetings and 1,000 miles a week. Are you kidding me? That is that. How many hours is that just sitting in a car?
It's a lot.
How do you do it? How do you juggle this life? Because it sounds to me like it's
It's
crazy.
a lot. It's a lot. I drive on average about 1,000 miles a week, and obviously that was a little different with COVID. But on average, I drive 1,000 to 1,200 miles a week. As I mentioned, I am married to Mike, and he is my partner, and we are partners. He very much has a career. We have two daughters who are 13 and 15, and at the end of the day, my family is my priority. But some people say that you can't do it all, especially as a woman. And there are days when I think I'm balancing everything well, and gosh, this is a piece of cake. And then there are some days when I'm like, I'm failing one. I'm not doing one. I'm not being a good mom, or I'm not being a good rep. I'm not. But for the most part, I love what I do and I love my job and I love being a working mom. I love setting a good example for my girls. I love them seeing me work hard and studying hard and preparing. We make it a family event. If I have a huge presentation on a Tuesday, then I tell the girls, okay, Monday night, I'm going to have to work late. You two are on dinner duty. You two are making dinner, which means you're cleaning up the kitchen and mom's up in her office. I still go down and eat with them. We still have the evenings together. Um, but it's just it takes a village. And I had one of my very best friends who is a senior vice president now, and she told me early on in my career when I had my girls, I was because when I had my girls when they were younger, I was a regional and I worked a lot more, and I traveled a lot more, and I recognized that for that season of my life, I can't travel and be gone when my babies are little, but your life goes in seasons, and that season will come around again. And I'm here now when my girls are 13 and 15, and quite frankly, they don't even know if I'm home or I'm not. So I can, put a little bit more into my career. But my friend, my colleague, who was, like I said, a senior vice president, she gave me the best advice one time. She said, "My advice to you is," she said, "the way I've always approached my job is I don't want my family to know that I have a job, and I don't want my job to know that I have a family." And that has been my mantra from day one. So I just try to balance it the best that I can. And the best advice I can give is I'm overtly, oddly organized. And that's just the way you got to do it.
So you live in Nashville.
I do.
It's a very hot town in the whole United States these days. People are just moving there in droves. Um, what do you get good opportunities for some social life, and do you have time for some of those great opportunities that are happening in that hopping town, that because of your status in the community that you really do get to take advantage of some of that, or do you just stay at home with the kids and
Well, I'm tired. I'm tired a lot. So, I was 32 and I got married. So there wasn't a lot that I hadn't done before I got married. So I kind of sowed all those social loads before I got married. But we are social. We're actually both, my husband and I are both very engaged in the community. Our girls are extremely busy. Our oldest is a volleyball player. Our youngest one is a dancer. We're both very involved with their schools, and that is our priority right now. I mean, do we have a social life? Oh, very much. We have a social life. We have very, very good dear friends. My husband's actually, he is in the building industry, and he has had wonderful opportunities to build for musicians within the industry, which has led to opportunities for us that, some people are not privileged to, which has been great. But Nashville's an awesome city to live in from a social standpoint, from a professional standpoint. I mean, we're talking about my career here. Nashville is the healthcare capital of the world. So to answer your
I didn't know
question,
that.
there are social opportunities, but there are obviously many, many professional opportunities. It's just a great place to live.
Well, it's just been a lot of fun talking to you. I don't want to keep you all day long, but what are the 3 books you've just read that would be a good advice if people read them that help them? You have 3?
That's a great question. Well, I do love to read. I always encourage people. There's a great book called Strength Finders 2.0 by Tom Rath, and it's an interesting book because through a series of questions, you find out what your strengths are. And I've done it with almost every company I worked for. It's used very widely within corporate America. I think I've done it 3 or 4 times, and interestingly enough, every time I do it, they may not be in the same order, but the same 3 strings always kind of pop up at the top. And one is achiever, which obviously, to be in sales, to be in pharma, you have to be very goal oriented. I mean, you have to set goals for yourself,
Right.
and you have to work towards those goals. And I mean, that is, if you're not goal oriented, and if you're not competing to get those goals, then pharma is not the industry for you, because every single day I'm ranked. Every day a report comes out that says where I'm at within the country, and everybody in the country sees it. So
Every day?
every day I know where I'm at every single day. And so
That's some pressure, isn't
it's
it?
pressure. So I'm always an achiever, achiever, activator, which is the next strength of mine. And that just means I get things done. I don't talk about it. I roll up my sleeves and do it. And then my last strength is always I'm competitive. So in those order, or in those form or fashion, in some order, I'm always those 3. So Strength Finders 2.0 is a really good one. Who Moved My Cheese is a great one. That's about evolving industries and just being fluid and staying on top of things, and
Well, that would really apply to your
that's
industry.
a
It
really good one.
changes
Yes,
daily,
yes.
really, doesn't it?
But Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. That is my go-to. I love that book. He is it's just it's an easy read. It's a good read, and it's got very applicable, actionable items that you can do as a professional to help you stay on top.
Is there anything left on your bucket list you're wanting to do that you haven't done?
Well, I'd like to learn how to play the guitar. I do live in Nashville, but
Yeah, I'm going to wait for that one.
yeah, you and me both. I'll do that on front of my cabin when I retire in the mountains. Mike and I want to retire in the mountains. We've decided, and that's what I'm gonna do when I retire.
Well, I don't think you should retire because you're too good at what you do.
You know what? I may not. And that I've always said, I thought I'd work until my mid-50s. I'm 51, but I don't have any desire to quit. It keeps you young. It's stimulating.
Right.
It's so rewarding. It's such a rewarding job and such a rewarding industry. And it's one
Well,
that
I'll tell you,
I don't take for granted.
I'm 70, and 70 is 70. You read about people dying younger than you every day, and you start thinking about it. But I love what I do, and if I retired, I'd be one of those guys that after 3 days of trying to fish or play golf, I I wouldn't have anything else to
Me
do.
too. Me too.
You know, so I just love working. I love getting up. I love doing stuff like this, meeting new people, having all kind of you know, friends to talk to and to just find out how they did it. And I really appreciate that you've come today and been on the podcast with us. And is there anything you'd like to say to help, you know, just to help the kids and the people be successful? Because you're obviously wildly successful.
You know, I don't know that there's any one word of advice that I could give to anyone, but I go back to my mom. You know, she used to tell me all the time growing up, and excuse my French, but she used to say, just don't do anything half-assed. I mean, if you're going to do it, just do it. I mean, you know,
Great advice.
even, you know, she was a nurse, and even growing up, I remember when I would make my bed, she would come in and, you know, show me how to do hospital corners on my bed when I was making my bed. I'm like, Mom, I'm 11. I don't care if I have hospital corners. Or, you know, at Christmas time when we're wrapping Christmas presents, we couldn't go to Walgreens and get a bag of 400, you know, pre-made bows that were $2. We had to make every bow individually, and every bow had to be perfect. And she's like, if you're going to do it, do it. Don't do it half-assed. And I've really taken that to heart, and I try to use that approach with everything that I do. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, because that's my brand that I'm building. And when people know that I'm doing it, it's going to be done right.
Well, you've built a great brand. I appreciate you coming today. Check in with me. Let me know how everything's going. Maybe we'll do this again next year.
I will, Randy. Best of luck to you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Tell us how you did it. Tell us how you did it.